Hi, I'm Jim Small, and I'm running for State Assembly in District 2. I grew up instilled with the values of hard work, giving back to the community, and spending money wisely. District 2 wants a representative in Carson City that will fight high taxes and regulations that hurt businesses and the livelihood of everyday Nevadans. I have carried those values all of my life, and I have the necessary experience to do the job. My name is Jim Small, and I'm running to be your assemblyman in District 2. Remember, think big, vote small. Paid for by Jim for Nevada.
Good afternoon. This is another episode of Veterans of Politics. This is Jim Jonas with Steve Sanson. We're pleased to have Jim Small, who is running for Assembly number 2, correct?
Yes.
Dos. Thank you very much, Jim, for coming on. Before we get started in our interview with Jim, I just want to thank all the candidates who came out for our endorsement interviews. I know with COVID-19, social distancing, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. So we do understand that campaigning right now is a little bit different than it has been in past years. And we want to thank them very much for taking the time out of their busy days to come out and tell us, answer a bunch of questions and tell us their viewpoints and stuff. Steve?
Well, I really don't have anything. I got a lot of questions for Jim.
Okay.
And I want to see.
Well, then let's not delay. I'm sure Jim Small is up to the challenge.
I appreciate that.
A little bio, Jim.
All right, a little bio. Before the bio, I had the opportunity to look through, listen, and appreciate the many interviews that VIPI did, and it was impressive.
You did some homework on us.
Yes, I did, and I was very startled by how detailed many of the questions were and how involved many of the interviewers were with the whole process. And I would encourage everyone to look through those interviews and listen to them, appreciate them, and understand how hard this group did to try to ascertain who were the best candidates for various positions. And it impacted me. It hit me right here. It really did. It was impressive. So I'm sorry, Steve. Please go ahead and ask your questions. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, bio.
All right. So hometown, Waynetown, Indiana. 27 people in my high school graduating class.
27?
27, not 2,700, 27. When I was a young farm boy, one of the many things that you did on the farm was work hard. You learned how to get out there and do it. You baled hay, you grew corn, you hoed corn, you sowed corn, you engaged in a lot of things. One of my most memorable adventures in high school was an expression called, are you ready for this? Cutting hogs. That was not good if you waited too long when the hogs, because they didn't really appreciate that whole cutting experience. And if someone would like a little more information about what that means, later I'll be glad to tell you. But the hogs didn't appreciate it much. I became a father on my 18th birthday. I did not graduate from high school in a traditional manner. I graduated from high school via a correspondence course through Indiana University. My wife and I had completed all the requisite requirements to graduate except for one credit in civics. Now, I don't know if anyone does civics anymore. Perhaps they should, rather than some of the strange classes that they do. But we took that course via correspondence, and both of us, of course, graduated. I was working in a factory at night. She worked at a fast food place called Burger Chef, not Burger King, Burger Chef. And you can Google it. They used to have 1,000 spots, and McDonald's beat them up and Burger King beat them up, and they closed. But she did that until she was 8.5 months pregnant, and her belly was out so far she couldn't reach the cash register any longer. No, it's true. It's true. And,
how much did that baby weigh at birth?
He was a small one. He was like 7 pounds, 2 ounces. He wasn't all that big, but she was a little girl, and we were young. Okay. We had him. We did not abort that child. I remember back at that time, there were some people in the neighborhood who said, you can fly down to Acapulco and have a week's vacation and take care of the problem. And she and I elected to not do that because we felt it was more important to have that child than it was to abort that child. And he has been an important part of our lives. We passed him under the scrambler light in the middle of the college campus while I was working 40 to 60 hour a week at various jobs, whatever I could find. She was able to work a bit, not too much because we just couldn't logistically do it. But we got through that, and we continued passing him back and forth. He was in college classes throughout much of his growing up, and I think it really probably helped him because he was always right there. I don't remember, there was something called key cards, punch cards back in the 70s. Is that ringing any bells with anyone? Sometimes we would take him into the computer lab before classes, and he learned how to type when he was really young. And he was like doing all these weird things with punch cards. And of course, the millennials today have never even heard of a punch card or a key card. But he actually learned how to type with one finger back when he was 4 years old. He went on and got a couple degrees, simultaneous master's, bachelor's from UCLA, and graduated summa cum laude. And actually, I'm happy about that because he beat his dad. I was only a lousy magna cum laude, which means you're like pretty high up there, but he beat me. And I was proud that he did, and he's now doing a lot of computer and internet stuff around the world. My first wife went on to become a naval commander. The greatest thing she ever did for me was she got me into a group called USAA. I still have it today after 35, 37 years. And we are doing that. After college, I started work with the federal government with a group called the National Labor Relations Board. A group that some could perceive or have a misperception on that is only about helping union people. Well, yes, the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, does help union people, but the idea, the premise, the theory behind the NLRB is that employees can vote, decide, make the decision about what their future will be. If that's going to be with the union, wonderful. If that's not going to be with the union, wonderful. We would have elections, and I participated in some of the largest NLRB elections that were ever held in the agency's history. And the question will always be asked at the end of the election, who won? Well, the answer was always, the employees won. Whether the employees voted for a union, they won. Whether the employees voted against having a union, they won because it was their decision. And when Flight 93 went down in the fields of Pennsylvania back in the early 2000s, after that terrible day on 9/11, it came out, it was obviously demonstrated that Americans have the idea of voting, deciding democratically what their future and their course will be. And that's what they did on Flight 93. They voted about taking on those terrorists. And that's what's so ingrained in us as Americans. So while there are things the NLRB does that I'm not proud of and I'm not all that happy about, I will always appreciate being involved in them because that agency exercised that option. It's so basic in us as Americans to vote on our future. Had the good fortune with working with the NLRB, the board around the country, many, many offices, many places. I first came here to Las Vegas in 1995 and had a house down at Green Valley Parkway in Wigwam in a place called Pinehurst. Pinehurst was like the end of the world back in 1995 going south. And had that house as my first house here, and since 95 I've had a house here in Clark County since that time, except for an 8 or 10 month period when I'd sold one and hadn't quite got the other one set up yet. So I always knew that this was going to be my home, this was going to be where I would be living forever. And even after I transferred out of here and had another promotion and went to Southern California, we kind of flew back and forth, and I got the Southwest Airlines thing down pretty good. Knew how to do that and had it perfected. I'd be at work Monday morning before many of the people in Los Angeles got to work. I had it perfected that well. We were fortunate enough to eventually become the regional director with the National Labor Relations Board in Los Angeles. That position is in the senior executive service. How'd I get that? Well, it was not because I was good looking. It was not because I was the most talented person. I will accept the reality that I was reasonably talented, but George Bush was president at that time, and the board was looking to try to maybe bring some more moderate positions to play in the regional director decision process. Regional directors make decisions that are akin to unreviewable decisions. They are akin to a county prosecutor, a state prosecutor in various states, and that prosecutor's decision about moving forward with actions is unreviewable. So it was a pretty good job. And I did that for a number of years, and I much appreciate the opportunity to do that. I decided to retire in 2011. I did that, moved here to Las Vegas full time at that time. I had the good fortune of meeting my wife the next year, my final wife. I call her the final wife.
How do you know she's final?
Well, she's going to be the final wife. I guarantee you, Steve.
What number final is this one?
It's more than 1 and less than 10. But
wow.
It's not quite that bad. But
so now I see what you and Steve get along.
Well, hey, you have a few wives, you learn from things over time.
Funny.
I will tell you, my first wife and I still do the Christmas card thing. And sometimes you can do that with people you're married to. Sometimes after you're married, that doesn't happen anymore. But
well, you guys share a child.
Yes, we share a child.
Is your only child?
He was, and I'm very happy with that.
He was.
Is.
Okay.
I like to joke. He's the only child I know of. Well, that's a little bit...
So you get that knock on the door.
Yeah, well, until it happens someday. I'm pretty sure it's not going to happen. I'm pretty sure it's not going to happen now. But I'm very proud of him. I'm very proud of the things I've been able to do in my life. Here in Las Vegas, I've had the opportunity to do things I wasn't able to do before. While I'm a life member of the Republican National Committee, the RNC, when I was a public employee, a federal employee, I was not able to participate actively other than making financial donations in any political way. So when I retired in 2011, I became very, very active in the local Republican Party. And done a number of things with the party, held elected party positions, appointed party positions, and have been involved in a number of campaigns over the years, doing the things that we have to do to get people elected. Those include walking door to door. Those include making telephone calls. I had a position at one time called Associate Chief of Staff of the Clark County Republican Party. And people said, what did you do as Associate Chief of Staff? Sounds like a pretty high-level position. I laughed. I said, well, I answered the phone. I cleaned out the bathrooms. And people have to do what they have to do to get things done. Every organization has to do what they have to do. When I was the regional director with the NLRB, and that was a reasonably...
What does that stand for, by the way?
NLRB, a regional director.
NLRB?
National Labor Relations Board.
Oh, okay.
NLRB. And you can Google NLRB and James Small while we're on the phone here. And I probably got some cases still bouncing around the Ninth Circuit. They're probably still out there.
What's your background? Are you a lawyer?
I have but a lowly master's degree, Steve. And it's in public administration, and I started to work with the board in 1976. And it was something I wanted to do. And I participated actively in employee organizations at that time. So I've been on both sides, the management side and the union side of organizations. And it's been interesting. One of the proudest times in my career, I think, was when I retired in 2011. My retirement activity, my event, party, if you would, was sponsored by the Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce, the Los Angeles Bar Association Labor and Employment Law Section, and a half a dozen different labor organizations. All jointly did that. There was one labor organization that didn't want to participate, and they referred to me as a rogue regional director because I decided some significant cases against their interest.
Hold on just 1 second. Are we still in his bio?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, wait, we're still doing the bio, man. You asked for a bio, we're giving bio here. So anyway, let's stop with all that stuff. And people, if you want to hear any more bio stuff, they can give me a call at my personal number, 702-396-6011. All right, sorry for taking so long.
All right, Jim, real quick before Steve.
Real quick, you said. All right.
Okay. I know he has a lot of questions, so I don't.
Okay, I'm going to say.
I don't want to take up a lot of his time because his questions are very important. So you're running for Assembly 2, Why the Assembly? With that kind of a bio, why is this the first time you've actually sought public office?
In 2018, I ran against the incumbent in Assembly District 2. It was a 5-term incumbent. Why did I run against him? He was a Republican. Well, when he started his office position, when he first ran, he was a strong, hardcore Republican conservative. And over time, he did some things that probably weren't as aligned with conservative values as would have been appropriate. For example, he voted for the what we call the commerce tax, and he did that notwithstanding that people here in our state voted overwhelmingly against it. And he went out there and he was behind the largest tax increase in history. And I do not believe that Republican candidates should be doing that. I do not believe Republicans should be promoting tax increases. And he had lost his way. And so I ran against him. I probably gave him one of the strongest races he had in his career. You'll have to ask him personally if that's what he thinks. But we didn't prevail, and we're back again. Now the seat's an open seat. Means he can't run again. So we have five Republicans running in that district, and we have 4 Democrats running. Because while it's a Republican plurality district, the Democrats see a possibility of being able to sway the district in the general election, depending on how the whole presidential thing goes and how everything washes down. So we do have 5 competitors running in my race.
Steve?
Well, Jim, you know that veterans in politics have been trying to rid the corruption in family court for some time now.
Yes.
And there's a couple of changes that we'd like to see happen in family court, which require a BDR, bill draft request. And one of the changes, I just wanted to hear your input and see where you stand on this. Is you understand that the Constitution affords that we have a jury, right, in court, that there's a jury box and the jury, hears the evidence and makes decisions and stuff like that, right?
Yes, may I comment on that for just a moment?
Sure.
I absolutely understand that and appreciate that, Steve, and I recognize why there have been changes now as a result of the red flag law, where now your firearms can't be removed from you in some sort of proceeding unless there's some sort of jury trial. And so I appreciate that. I recognize that. Where are you wanting to go with that? What do you want to do with it?
Well, you ever been to family court here in Clark County?
Regrettably, I've only been by some of the proceedings a couple times. I have not stayed extensively. I've heard some of the dialogue. Divorce proceedings are some of the most terrible, awful situations that can happen in anyone's life. And since I've been divorced more than once, I can speak to that. And criminal proceedings show terrible people at their best. Divorce proceedings, family court proceedings show wonderful people at their worst.
And one of the reasons why I'm bringing this up, because there's several thousand litigants that follow the family court part of it. And if you go to any family court building and you walk into a courtroom, there is no jury box. But if you go to civil criminal, there is. But in family court, there is no jury box. Now, I understand that jury box can't be for everything, like divorces and stuff like that, on marital assets. I get that. But when it comes to termination of parental rights and relocation of children, I mean, we have a constitutional right to parent their child. And once you get ripped that away from you by one man, one judge, or one woman, one judge, and there's no jury box, I think that there's a problem with it. Would you write up a BDR to include jury procedures in family court? And we could start out with relocation of children, or relocation of children, or termination of parental rights, instead of one person making that decision for the rest of that family's life.
As much as I would like to give a quick response to that with a firm yes or a firm no, I think it's going to require some exploration, some serious review. Okay. appreciate, I like, I support the concept. I support the concept. I think it's a good concept that
But do you agree that our Constitution affords us the right to be
I recognize that the constitutional rights that we have generally suggest and probably promote the idea that a jury trial should always be appropriate. Now, there are situations that are probably out there, and that's why I'm kind of hemming and hawing a bit, because I can imagine some really, really terrible domestic situations that occur that may not, I don't want to say be suited, but may be so awful that the jury could be prejudiced by what they hear. And I'm a little concerned about that. That's why I would want to do some research on it, Steve. I would like to explore it. I'd like to talk about it more. I think we need some serious scientific study on that.
Do you believe that it's too delicate and you don't want a lot of people to hear certain things? Is that what you're talking about?
There can be situations that are just so ugly that it would prejudice a one or the party or the other if it came out. Now, just because someone says something happens, you and I, everyone knows that doesn't mean that it really happened.
Right.
But
that's why you present it to a jury.
Well, but sometimes the jurors can't unhear some total off-the-wall story about the husband or the wife doing whatever. You know, I will tell you, I mentioned I was divorced more than once. People make claims in proceedings that aren't always true.
In any court.
Yeah, and in any court. True. The problem with family court is, and I will give you an example of something that occurred in my life in the mid-1990s. My wife at that time and I were separated, and she called up my relatives, and she claimed that I had sexually abused my stepdaughter. It was a lie. But I don't know if juries can unhear that.
Well, let me stop you right there. I've been sitting in courtrooms since '98. All right. Just observing. Have you ever sat in a rape and molestation courtroom?
Actually, I have.
And those things you can't unhear either.
Yeah, I hear you.
And those things are really graphic, and those things are really brutal and awful. So what's the difference? And they have a jury box there.
And that may be,
what's the difference?
That may be what would persuade me to say maybe we need a jury. That example that you just utilized is a perfect example of that, because I couldn't unhear that rape testimony that I'd heard back in the 90s. And people say terrible things in divorce proceedings. They say terrible things. And many of them are true, many of them are untrue. And maybe rather than only a judge deciding, maybe it is necessary. So let's talk about that some more. I'm pretty comfortable that we're going to get through this primary. I'm pretty comfortable we're going to be in a position to be able to address legislation in the
if
Assembly.
you get through the primary, Mr. Smalls, you won the race, because that is a Republican district.
We will work hard after the primary. We will go forward. We'll do what we need to do to assure that Republicans up and down the ticket, from the top to the bottom, are going to prevail. One could say, yes, you're going to win the general election if you get through the primary in a Republican plurality district. I'm not going to take that position. I'm going to take the position I'm going to be working just as hard in the general election campaign as I am in the primary. But I really was interested in what you were saying, that example you used about the rape case. Let's talk about that some more later.
So real quick, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve. What was the case that they came down with family court that you can't recall a family court judge? Is that what it was?
Oh yeah, Supreme Court. Well, you can't recall any judges. Supreme Court came down with a ruling that you can't recall any judges based on the Catherine Ramsey case in North Las Vegas when they were trying to recall her. So the only defense in getting rid of a judge, because judges also have immunity. And they have judicial immunity. You can't recall them, and they also have the statute of limitations on their side as well. So they have three layers of I can't be touched Teflon. But the only way you could get rid of them is either through the Judicial Disciplinary Commission, and they have lack of transparency in that regard. And the other one is voting.
Vote them out.
Vote 'em out.
Yeah.
And use those bad cases, the bad decisions, as the exemplar for voting them out. Did you know that Judge X made this decision in this case where
and we're working on that.
Right.
So I got more questions for you.
Okay, Steve,
Mr.
go.
Smith. And like I said, there's several thousand litigants that follow us that only thing they want to know is family court. So they when they vote for a candidate, it's somebody that's going to change something in family court.
I hear you.
And you're a constitutionist, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you ever heard of a saying called vexatious? Vexatious litigant means that a litigant that is constantly filing and constantly doing this. What's the difference between a litigant filing to keep somebody that they love and part of their family, a son, daughter, whatever, or a grandparent filing for that matter, than an attorney getting paid, and the only thing that he sees is or she sees is the almighty dollar, and they're filing just as much? Why does a litigant is considered a vexatious, but an attorney would be considered, he's fighting for his client? What's the difference?
I hear exactly what you're saying.
But yet when they deem a litigant vexatious, they stop them from filing anything. They can't file anything anymore. So their constitutional rights just went out the window because they can't file any documents. They can't defend themselves. Their hands are completely tied. What's the difference between them and an attorney doing the same thing?
All right, in theory, what you're saying, I really like, and I think most people would like that we should be able to litigate what we want to litigate. In theory, like so many theories, when you get into the weeds, when you start looking at the specifics, it can become more problematic. If this litigant has filed 150 legal actions in the last year, is this litigant abusing the system? Let's ask ourselves, 150 proceedings in the last year, is that troublesome? Is that maybe pushing the envelope too far? 10, 15, who knows?
Yeah, but you got to understand something.
Yes.
Because this litigant is fighting to get their kid.
All right.
An attorney is fighting to get paid.
Get money, yes, and they're very
so why if somebody is fighting to take custody of their child, or to get some type of visitation, and they file 150 documents trying to get their loved one, and over here the attorney is doing the exact same thing.
The same.
So the rules should apply to both parties, not just one. You can't stifle one party for doing exactly what another party is doing and reward the other side.
Agreed.
And say, that side is defending their client, but this litigant is trying to get custody of the child.
I would spank the attorney who had filed 150 actions. I would certainly spank the litigant, the individual.
But there's no law out there. There's no law.
Well, maybe. See, whenever you try to make a law for the situation,
right.
It can become problematic. It can come back and bite us as individuals, as Americans. I recall back in the day, there were people they were called charging parties with the NLRB. And the charging party, after 20 or 30 cases, would start to have that aura of a problematic charging party, and they were frivolous cases. And eventually, it was rare, very rare, but eventually you had to say to that person, we're not taking your case anymore, and look them right in the face and say, you're not doing this in good faith. Now, the 150 number that I talked about would probably be indicative of something that was in bad faith.
Right.
If we're talking about an individual who has 15 or 20 proceedings over the course of a year, that wouldn't suggest to me that individual or any individual attorney was acting in bad faith. 150 proceedings in the course of a year probably would. So we have to look at each one individually, and I would encourage the courts to look at it fairly and objectively. And I recognize and appreciate how difficult that is, because what we're doing is we're tearing someone's family apart. And we're harming potentially someone who's a hopefully upstanding future young citizen, or his or her brothers and siblings in that whole process.
So I guess, sorry for cutting you off, but I guess my point is, could you do a BDR that would give equal justice on both sides instead of having the scale just go like this all the time?
Steve, there's no question that individuals, pro per, I think they're called, individuals who are acting on their own because they don't have the money to be going forward. Let's do a sidebar for just a moment and come back to this. Maybe something we want to consider is the idea that everyone, like in criminal proceedings and domestic proceedings, that the state should provide a free counsel in proceedings so the family can be protected. We have to give that some thought and think about that. But now back to your question. My answer would be that we need to address it very, very carefully. They should be treated the same, whether they're lawyers, whether they're acting on their own, and let's treat them the same. But I'm thinking about this idea of having some sort of third party act as a neutral in a proceeding. Can we do that? Has anyone given that?
Well, I always say if we can't get a jury box, we should have a tribunal, a three-panel judge.
Yes.
A three-panel judge to make decisions like that. I would go forward for that as well. Because a judge or anybody could be biased against one side or another.
The likelihood
and the bias just stays throughout the whole case.
Yes, and the likelihood
never leaves.
A three-panel is not going to happen like that. That's the likelihood. You're right.
Just like how they have 7 at the Supreme Court.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that moves on to my next question. And I have a lot for family court. And one of the reasons why I'm bringing this all up to you, Mr. Smalls, is because these litigants are saying ask more questions regarding family court. Okay. So and this applies to everybody, not just I mean this could be a veteran, it could be anybody. So it doesn't matter if you're a veteran or not, you still are going to be held to the same standards, right?
Of course.
Okay.
Hopefully.
In civil criminal, there's a program that if you can't afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you.
Yes.
In criminal cases.
Yes.
Okay? Because you're looking at jail time.
Right.
Not in civil. But in family court, judges go from civil criminal civil. They go back and forth. And they do this thing called contempt of court. Okay? So they hold you in contempt of court and you're looking at jail time now. And when you're looking at jail time in family court, you're there by yourself defending yourself if you cannot afford an attorney. So I ask lots of judges, I'm like, what's the difference between civil contempt and criminal contempt? And they couldn't really give me an answer. I said, does a jail cell know the difference between civil contempt and criminal contempt? The only thing is that you're going to go to jail. That's the bottom line. If you're found guilty of contempt, you go to jail. But in criminal court, if you're found guilty of contempt, or if you're going through a contempt procedure and you cannot afford an attorney, they give you a public defender. Now, why can't the same be applied in family court if you cannot afford an attorney and you have a civil contempt looking at jail time? Why couldn't you get awarded an attorney to defend you?
It seems like a no-brainer to me. It seems like that's
why isn't it?
Well, we need
this no-brainer law.
Well, because sometimes it takes a long time to get a law changed.
Nobody brings it up.
Right, no one has, but I think we need, after this meeting today, and before we go too much farther in the campaign, I want to talk to you more about that because I think it's a good idea. I like the sounds of it. I was alluding to that earlier on before you got into the more specifics about it, but the idea that there could be some tribunal, and the tribunal could be the potential person who could avoid or represent, if you would. I have a hard time using that word represent because that suggests an attorney-client relationship. But maybe we need to have some alternative mechanism in place that would permit a outside neutral kind of body or person to be involved in the whole proceeding. And if there's a situation where someone is potentially subjecting themselves to time in jail, they should be able to have some representation there. I like that idea. Let's explore that more later.
Okay.
And I'd be interested in talking about that as a matter we can put in as a bill draft on. We'll have to talk about the specifics.
In California, there's a law.
All right.
And
now, it's a bad example when we talk about California, but all right.
I'm going to tell you. In California, there's a law. If an attorney or the attorney's law firm gives to the judge in campaign donations $1,500 or more, the judge has to put it on record. Say, this attorney gave me X amount of dollars, or his law firm gave me X amount of dollars. If you still want me to continue with this case, I'll be more than happy to. I won't be biased or whatever. Or if you don't feel comfortable talking to the attorneys or the pro se's, I will recuse myself from this case. That law does not exist here in this state.
Steve, I would be happy to support legislation like that. It's interesting you bring that up because sometimes people don't know who's representing a party in a case or whether they have some relationship. I did not know that Jim Jonas knew my campaign manager before I came in here for an interview. I didn't know that. And Jim came out and brought that out and he
disclosed it.
And disclosed it. And I thought, okay.
they don't do that much in family court. These judges are tight-lipped.
It seemed like that's what people should be doing if they're ethical. And maybe we should have a law that requires them to do it if they're not doing it voluntarily. And what Jim did was news to me because I didn't know he had any knowledge of my campaign manager. But the reality is, yeah, sure, why shouldn't that be a law in our state? I'm on board with that.
Okay. Do you feel, well, I don't know if you feel this way, but I know I do. I realize that a lot of family court judges don't know the Constitution. I've heard several family court judges in their courtroom and say, the Constitution does not apply in my courtroom.
Well, they should not be saying that.
Okay, and now, are they ignorant, or is there just stupidity, or they just way out there? Do you think there should be a mandatory course on the Constitution for any judge, period?
I think there should be a mandatory course on high school for every student graduating from high school to understand what the Constitution is all about. One of our judges, I won't use his name, he was actually endorsed by this group, he's a good man, was chastising a potential juror, and he did something that was, he was so upset that a potential juror was trying to get out of jury service that he whipped out a Constitution from his pocket, and he was kind of shaking it, and it accidentally left his hand and hit the wall, and he got a chastising from the state Supreme Court because of that. He was talking to someone about how important it is to apply our Constitution. That document on a national level has kept us together since 1789, and we need to know it, and judges should not be saying the Constitution does not apply in my courtroom. That's not something they should be saying, and after we finish here today, I'm going to ask you the names of those persons who have said that, because I would like to find an opportunity in my coming months to talk to them about that.
You know, there are several laws in the books right now. You got canon laws, and you got, those are the judicial laws that every judge is supposed to follow.
Vacatious.
And you have the rule of evidence that they're supposed to follow. But these judges like to use this one thing in family court called discretion. How far is that discretion supposed to be without a judge starting to break the law?
That's a legitimate question. And at first blush, I would immediately say sometimes discretion is necessary. Now, the application of discretion must be applied with a significant amount of something called wisdom. And hopefully, when someone uses discretion, they're also going to be using wisdom. What you're saying to me suggests that perhaps, no. What you're saying to me demonstrates that sometimes there have been people who have not demonstrated wisdom when they've exercised their discretion.
There are laws on the books that regard in sealing of cases.
Yes.
And closed hearings.
Yes.
And when you seal a case, you have to still have certain parts of the case open.
Public, right?
Public. When these attorneys seal cases, the whole thing disappears off of the computer. So if you're living in another state, you can't even see your case anymore. You have to actually physically drive down here to see your case. I think what I'm trying to say is that a lot of these attorneys and judges are abusing the closed hearing law and the sealed case law. What do you think should be done as a lawmaker, which you're trying to be, should be done to prohibit judges and attorneys from just arbitrarily sealing cases, arbitrarily close hearings because they don't like X, Y, and Z that's sitting in the audience, and just close, Your Honor, I'd like to close the hearing because I just want to close it. And the judge goes, oh, yeah, that's fine, because I don't want my bad behavior to be announced either. And I'm sure you don't want your bad behavior to be announced. You don't want your bad behavior to be announced. I don't want my bad behavior to be announced. Damn it, let's close the case. Let's seal the damn thing too while we're at it. So nobody knows what the hell we're doing. We could screw up this case so badly and nobody will know. And I'm talking like that because I'm trying to act like a judge.
I hear you. Sometimes people fail to use that wisdom I described earlier. When I was working with the federal government for 20 years, I also served in a capacity as Freedom of Information Act officer for the regional office, and I gave a number of seminars on the application of what appropriately should be disclosed and what should be available for public access. Sometimes it's a difficult call that's made. Many times it's a difficult call that's made. I will use the example of the terrible events here on 1 October, where one of our local judges initially declined to release autopsy reports of people who had died. And that judge did that out of respect to the families. Now, the Review Journal wanted access to that information. I understand why the judge did what the judge did and initially denied it. Eventually, his actions were overturned, but the family kind of was given a secondary role in the whole process, and their interest and feelings were not heard. While we cannot willy-nilly refuse to have information publicly disclosed, there are circumstances in some cases where the information is so, or at least the allegations, whether it's true or not, it's a whole different story. The allegations are sufficiently heinous that maybe those allegations warrant some consideration to not having those allegations publicly available. And I'm talking about situations related to child abuse claims, and those may or may not be true, and years later, decades later, the claim that you did something to a child that wasn't true.
I understand parts of cases dealing with juvenile should be sealed. I get that.
And they may not be true.
But not the divorce part.
No.
Not the custody part. Not the visitation. I mean, all that. I don't think all that should be sealed. I mean, when you're talking about a juvenile and an assault on a juvenile, yes, I get that. But the rest of the stuff, no. The rest of the stuff I don't get at all.
In theory, it sounds like we're on the same page there. I think I need to look at the specific allegations and specific situations before I'm in a position to say, yeah, we should open that up to the public. We should not permit a judge to restrict that kind of discussion. Sometimes there are frivolous claims that are made in divorce proceedings. Again, earlier I talked about people, wonderful people, great people are at their worst in those proceedings, and sometimes people say untruthful things in the proceeding, and I don't think that's fair to have that out there.
I have two more questions regarding family court, then I'm going to stop.
All right.
Stop. I'll let Jim go ahead.
Okay.
But there's another thing that
I do want to talk to you about some of those ideas later.
There's another thing I've been noticing in family court is the only safeguard for anybody to go after a judge right now is the Judicial Disciplinary Commission. Okay? But the Judicial Disciplinary Commission is made up of judges and lawyers, and they all belong to this club called the State Bar.
Yep.
Okay. They all go to CLE courses, and they all go and mix and mingle. They all invite each other over to different houses. And I'm saying every single one of them do that, but majority of them do it in the circle. But one thing that's lacking with the Judicial Disciplinary Commission is transparency. Okay. A litigant will file something against a judge. The judge responds. But the Judicial Disciplinary Commission won't let you see the response and they'll just end it on what the judge writes. You understand? So if the judge writes, no, that didn't happen, this didn't happen, oh, that person is full of shit, the Judicial Disciplinary Commission will take that as gospel, won't allow the litigant or the complainer to see what is being written so they can respond, and just settle the case and end the investigation right then and there, which I think is unjust. What do you feel about that?
I would have to agree with you. That sounds as though justice isn't being served in that situation. The truth needs to come out. As a former federal investigator, the truth needs to come out, and it's necessary to hear both sides, and then after hearing both sides, to go back to both sides and explore that. So what you described to me would not be how I believe the legal system should address allegations of judicial misconduct. There's a flaw in that remedial process.
And then my last question for this is, would you support, well, I know a couple sessions ago they tried to get this passed, but it didn't pass, a judicial attorney general, somebody that has a manpower to have court observers go into courtrooms and just see, because you got to understand something. If a litigant or an attorney or a judge, what have you, don't report something, nothing gets investigated.
Right.
You have to actually bring the complaint to them.
Yes.
But with a judicial attorney general, they have the power to go in and fine complaints.
Yes.
Instead of somebody bringing one to them, they'll go look for them. Mm-hmm. So do you think that we should have a judicial attorney general, somebody that has the arms that could go into courtrooms or send people in the courtrooms anonymously to observe the judges, to observe the marshal, to observe the attorneys, to make sure that everybody is doing their job?
On the federal level, there's a mechanism for each federal agency to have some mechanism called an inspector general. The inspector general is a mechanism, a device, a procedure that can independently review actions of the agency. That inspector general is doing what you're suggesting, Steve. We probably need that in our state government, not only on the judicial level, we need it probably in every state agency. That sort of overview where someone can independently review the actions, decisions, procedures, processes of that agency. On the judicial level, this inspector general could look at those court cases and see if they're done correctly. So maybe, while I'm a Republican and normally support contractions in government, this may be an area where there needs to be some expansion in government, and have someone akin to this inspector general who may be a good mechanism, review device for the family court system. So I'm on board there. We need to talk about it some more. I think your idea is a good one.
Okay, thank you.
Jim. Hi.
Where's Jim? Was Jim here?
Jim? No, he's listening to everything. I can see it.
It's one of those things. So just so the viewers and listeners understand, it's not that me, Jim Jonas, does not care about family court, because I do. Just Steve is much more abreast at this issue than I am. So I like to follow to Steve on
Thank you, Jim.
On these discussions. Just, full transparency, I've never been married. Right? I don't
you want to get married?
Okay. So, anyway, first off, one of the things that I wanted to touch on was transparency.
All right.
So, just so viewers and listeners do understand, I was on the panel for Mr. Smalls when he did our thank you for coming and doing our endorsement interviews. I did.
Well, let's add to that.
Let's
add to that because Jim Small has been endorsed by Veterans in Politics.
Yes. I was going to get to that, but the reason why I wanted to say a couple other things is, so while I did, because we went on a skeleton crew because of the COVID-19, I did still act as pretty much like the moderator. But
you did a good job, by the way.
But thank you. I did accuse myself in voting one way or the other for Jim Small because I have been friends with his campaign manager for a number of years. And Mr. Small is in very good hands, by the way.
Who's this campaign manager?
Jennifer Barrier.
Ah.
And I've known her for a number of years, and I knew her. I actually met her dad before I met Jennifer.
She's now married.
I forgot for a minute.
She's now married to a military officer, by the way.
Yeah. So missed out on that one. See, I'm always late to the game.
Late to the game.
Anyway, but so I did recuse myself from voting for Mr. Small's endorsement one way or the other. And then, like, anytime I had a conflict on certain things, other people that we've endorsed, Dr. Spiritos, we endorsed Dr. Spiritos as well. I recused myself from that because he was my mom's oncologist. So obviously, and he saved my mom's life, so I would have been a little biased in that. And I just think that is something that's truly missing in government. So,
all right,
real quick to now actually get to a question. As we start talking about transparency, I know there for a minute I started acting like Mike Yepko. Gotta bust his chops. Anyway, so what do you think about campaign donations? Because here's my theory. So we had Russ Feingold and we had Senator John McCain at the time, and they came up with this great grand idea that they're going to get all this. They're going to get money out of politics. Good luck. So anyway,
great theory.
Supreme Court's already come down and said that you have a First Amendment right to petition your government. So they were on the wrong side of that. So what ended up happening with this campaign finance laws is then all of a sudden you came out with all these 501c3s and all these crazy PACs acting on each other's behalf. Mr. Small, what would you think about a bill that I've always said that I think I should be able to tomorrow, if I had the money, I don't, I should be able to give you $1 million for your campaign. As long as you fully disclose it, it doesn't matter.
It's an interesting question. At first blush, one would
you take it?
If the law permitted me to take $1 million donation, I would be a liar. Any politician would be a liar if they said they would not take the money. Now, is that morally the right thing to do? Probably not. I'll go stronger than that. No, it's not morally the right thing to do, but politics is run on money. And indeed, in my campaign, one of the reasons that one of the other candidates was endorsed by a group had to do with money. Her PACs had a lot of money that they promised to the Republican Party, and money talks. So sadly, it's legal, and unless we are willing to say, okay, no candidate can spend more than X amount of money in a particular campaign, it's going to continue. And the idea that it affects free speech if people, parties, individuals, businesses are not able to donate money is a real authentic constitutional question. Should you be able to say, no, Steve, you should not donate $10,000. No, Jim, you should not donate $10,000. It's a tough call. Most of us can't afford to donate $10,000 to campaigns. But where is the government's role in that? That's a tough question. McCain was trying to do something good. It was a good theory. It was problematic. And I don't have any easy answers to that. I really don't, Jim. I know where the problem is. We see the problem, but I don't think there are any easy answers. We need to talk about it a lot to get to some solution.
So one last question I have for you.
All right.
Well, I have two more, but they're both short.
Okay.
Based on, excuse me, based on this COVID-19, how are you going about campaigning? Like, I mean, when you first walked in, the first thing I reached my hand out to shake your hand, and we had to touch elbows because it's just so ingrained in all of us to shake hands and come to somebody's door. And so how are you going about campaigning, not being able to do that?
We're doing a lot of virtual campaigning. Virtual campaigning means you set up things on Facebook. You can do it that way. You can do it through Zoom meetings. You can do it through other meetings. And people are even starting to have Zoom fatigue because there's so many Zoom meetings going on.
Zoom fatigue.
Zoom, yes, I was reading about it. My wife had 3 Zoom meetings the other day, and she kind of, after the third meeting, she just laid her head down on her desk and said, I'm exhausted. And I wanted to kind of snicker about how hard it was to watch the screen. And next thing you know, I'm reading about people who are experiencing this Zoom fatigue because of the meetings. It's just so draining for people. We're doing that. Our next Zoom meeting, and we've had 4 or 5 so far, will be next Wednesday, 3 to 5 o'clock. Jim for Nevada at gmail.com. Send me a message and we'll send you a Zoom invite. At that meeting, we will be taking names and addresses of people who are interested in masks that have our logo on it. Think big, vote small. We have hundreds.
You got masks with your logo.
Yes, we have the mask on order. Yes, we do.
That's cool.
Think big, vote small. You will have the mask. We will put them in sanitary bags and deliver them to you if you're interested.
I want one.
All right. Yeah, well, you'll get 2, Steve.
And I'll wear it on the show.
All right, well, we'll be happy to have you. The mask
along with
on order.
my rebar hat. Like that.
Hey, a guy by the name of Ron Solomon. Do you know Ron, by chance?
Name doesn't ring a bell.
He's doing some stuff with a MAGA warehouse, MAGA mall. He does a lot of MAGA materials, and he has some connections that will get us some masks. And they're supposed to be here by, hopefully, the time of our next Zoom virtual meeting next week. And we have meetings scheduled after that. Of course, we're doing the traditional mailers. We're doing the telephone calls, but it's a whole new ball game.
Right.
Just before things got closed down here, I ordered several thousand flyers door to door. They're called door hangers. And guess what? We're stuck with 3,000 door hangers that we can't hang out.
You know what I would do? I would get somebody to go out in the middle of the night and just hang them on the doors.
I
mean, don't make any sense wasting them.
Well, I hear you, but I'd heard that one campaign was continuing to go door to door, dropping things off, not talking to people, just dropping it off, and we're getting a lot of negative feedback.
Well, go at night.
Go at night. I'm trying to avoid the negative feedback.
I wonder who that was.
I'm trying to avoid the negative feedback. So we're doing the virtual stuff as best we can. Nice. We're doing text messaging to specific people that we know who
Could you put them in the mail, these hangers?
We have mailed the particular hangers, the particular flyers to a group of 800 inveterate Republican voters, so those people have already received them. But we have almost 16,000 Republican voters in Assembly District 2, one of the largest Republican voter registration districts in the state, and we're out there doing that. So it's a new type of world. I think, our campaign thinks, and we are betting on the election essentially being over by about May 20th to May 25th. Even though the election isn't over until June 9th, when people get their mail ballots the first week of May, I don't think most people are going to keep that ballot for a month before they return it. Right. They're going to complete that ballot, they're going to send it back, and the election is going to be over. So we're trying to focus our activities earlier on in the whole process, because that last 2 weeks, when normally your mailbox is flooded with hundreds of campaign flyers, it's going to be a waste of time for people because everyone's already going to have voted by that time.
All right, Jim. Well, that's all the questions I have. You got any more questions?
Well, yeah, I got one.
All right, Steve.
What do you feel about term limits?
Term limits are one of those things where it's a two-sided sword. The one side is that if you have someone who's been in Congress, a legislature for a long period of time in a position, they have all the inside track on how to do things. But the downside is that they have all the inside track on how to do things. Right. And that isn't necessarily always a good option. So I believe in our state we're doing the right thing, that in the legislature after 6 terms, you're termed out after 12 years. The Senate after 3 terms, you're termed out after 12 years.
So basically, all political seats have term limits, right?
Except the United States Congress, which does not.
Well, and the Senate too. You want to go local, I'm just going to break it down local.
All right, local.
There is no term limits on the judicial bench.
All right. Now, that's a very interesting question. Judges are frequently appointed to positions that are almost lifetime positions. our judges have
Federal
to face,
judges.
Federal
judges are lifetime.
Federal judges, yes. And I had the good fortune to have a position like that, and I understood what it meant. The local judges that we have here in Clark County have to face the voters periodically, and I think that's a good thing. Those people in family court who are doing bad activities, they need to face the voters.
Assembly and state senate and public administrator and county commission and city, they all face voters, but they all have term limits.
Yes.
So why can't judges face voters and have term limits?
That's a legitimate question. It's a legitimate question. I like it. I like the concept. I like the idea. How many terms, how many years should a judge be on the bench?
Well, a district court judge is 6-year term, so 2 terms. Municipal court judges and justice of the peace are 4 years. So
3 terms?
3 terms.
You know, I philosophically could be on board with that.
Yeah.
I don't
because I think because a lot of these attorneys don't want to run against a certain judge because that judge has power or money or he's a friend of this or friend of that. And I can name several judges that in this election that should have drew opponents, but everybody is scared to run against them.
All right, so your idea is a 12-year limit on their terms?
Exactly.
I think I could be on board with that.
That way they could be a little bit more humble, because a lot of these judges are not humble. They have no empathy, they have no compassion, and they shouldn't even make the bench, period. But they're there. So what are we going to do about it? We're going to let them stay? I mean, it's just ridiculous. I going into these courtrooms I mean, years ago, if you told me that these judges wasn't doing what they doing, these judges did what they did, I probably wouldn't believe you. But after
you've seen it,
I've seen it for myself. I know.
I hear you. I think, Steve, after hearing you talk, while I was initially not in a place where I would support term limits for judges, I think I'm comfortable in saying, yeah, I think I could go there.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Well, we want to thank you very much, Mr. Small, for coming on. So for
have him look in the camera and give his look in the camera and no. Could you look into the camera and tell people why they should go to the voting or fill out their primary ballot?
I would be happy to.
And your contact info.
All right. My name is Jim Small. I'm running for Assembly in District 2, far west side, out around Red Rock Casino. I'm the conservative candidate running in that district. Many people will tell you they are conservatives. Check out their background. Check out what they've done. Check out who they have donated to, who gives them money, and the organizations that they participate with. I think you'll be happy after you check me out to discover that I've participated in many conservative organizations. Just recently received an A rating from the Nevada Firearms Coalition. I'm a life member of the NRA. I'm a life member of the Republican National Committee and regularly participate with conservative groups and support conservative candidates. I am your conservative candidate in Assembly District 2. I request your support. I request your vote. Check me out at jimfornevada.com. My cell number is 702-396-6011. That's my personal cell. It's not some Google number that will send you off into voicemail land. That's my number. I will answer that phone if I'm not already on my call with another voter in the area. My Facebook page, Jim Small for Assembly 2. I like my little promo. Please join us for one of our Zoom meetings. It's Think Big, Vote Small. We have some masks that we'd like to give out to voters in 82. We'll be glad to get those delivered to you after you join us at the meeting. I appreciate the time here today. Think big, vote small.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And that's Jim Small, and Jim Small has been endorsed by Veterans in Politics, so we want to encourage all of our viewers and listeners to go out and think big, vote small for Assembly District number 2. So that's all we have for this afternoon. This is Jim Jonas with Steve Sanson. Until next week.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, guys.